See what freeze frame we get. Okay, let me just pop in here so that I can see the comments and follow along, because the opportunity when you okay, let me just when you join live, the advantage to joining live is you get to ask me all kinds of questions as we go along. So that's the advantage to joining me live here. Okay, so if you're here, then let me know you're here. Then it makes me feel one, less alone, and two, like I'm actually talking to you. So if you're live, just pop into the comments and say live. If you're here on replay, then just pop into the comments and say replay. Either way, it kind of like signifies to me like you're an imperfect action taker. You're ready to like, hey, I need to pick up what I need to know from this training, and then I'm going to be the kind of person who kind of moves forward and does something with it. So we don't want to widen the gap between what you know what to do and what you're actually doing. We want to close that gap. So the goal would be with today's trainings and all trainings that I do is that one, I take something a little bit more complex, help you simplify it, figure out how to apply it and what kind of the next steps would look for. And the trainings are meant for you to come back, and because you might grab one or two things from today, then you master those things or get consistent at those things, and then you come back and grab two other things or whatever that is for you. So that's the goal with all of the trainings that I do. One, in order to, like, I know what to do, I just don't do it. We gotta be the kind of person who takes imperfect, consistent action. Hi, Sharon. Hi, Sarah. Okay, so today is we're looking at we're basically looking at this is training number 3. Like, a lot of women, when I talk to them, they're like, I'm doing the exercise thing, but am I doing it right? Because I'm not seeing results or not feeling the change, or like, is this enough? Is this good enough? Right? So since this is part 3, I'm going to ask for you to go to the other parts to kind of get more in terms of the exercise, what you need to do in perimenopause or menopause in terms of exercise. But this one we're going to be looking, hi Sabrina, we're looking at midlife training and the nutrition breakdown specifically in this one. So it's an opportunity for you to go back if you haven't gone back, but it's also an opportunity for you, hey, if you've done those 2 trainings, now you can add to it with this one. So where I wanted to start off is looking at cardio, because I get asked a lot about cardio, and if you grew up in the 80s or 90s, cardio was the thing that we all heard, but we were at a different age in the 80s and 90s, and we also know better, and because we know better, we do better. So let's look at, well, how you approach cardio. Why does that matter in perimenopause or menopause? So during perimenopause, your body becomes more sensitive to like how it handles stress. There's something called the stress tolerance window. So basically it's like, hey, maybe when you were in 20s and 30s, you could bounce back from stress a lot easier, right? It's like the little things didn't aggravate you or irritate you as much as they are right now. So basically your window was like this, and you could operate within the window, right? And now when you're in perimenopause, how you handle stress is different, right? And so the window becomes shorter, so you have less tolerance, but also some of you are like exceeding the window, and that's when you get extreme, more highs or more lows, or like all of a sudden you're like, why does everything piss me off? When he's chewing beside me, why does that get under my skin when it never used to? So what we dismiss from that is or exclude from that is exercise. How exercise it plays a role in terms of our stress when we have a shorter tolerance for stress, for example, right? So high intensity exercise or long duration cardio, that can spike cortisol, which is like a stress hormone, which is already harder to regulate as kind of estrogen and progesterone decline. And then like before, your body just doesn't bounce back the same way. And maybe you're noticing that in more injuries, it takes you a longer time to recover, that sort of thing. Or you just like don't have the energy to kind of go up, you don't have the oomph to kind of do it, right? So translation, that same HIIT class or long distance, a run that used to energize you might now, for some people, for most, might leave you more drained, inflamed, moody, craving sugars, or craving just simply more food, like your hunger goes up because your hormonal environment shifted. Now, I don't want that if you're ending it here and you're being like, okay, Cindy's message is don't do any long distance cardio, don't train for a marathon or whatever, or don't do any high intensity. That's not what I'm saying, or I'm going to go into that into more detail. It's just to say, like right now, what I'm pointing out to you is the impact that has on stress. Often we think about stress as like, I don't have any stress, like no life events happen, nobody's died, nobody's sick, I'm stable in my job, but we don't think about all those little micro stresses that add up to that window shortening and shortening, right? So even the other day I was thinking about, like, I cleaned the bathroom, and then my husband went in and he shaved his beard and then left all of the beard trimmings he's coming into the sink. And then even that was like, that's a little bit of like adding to your stress as well, right? I just did that and then that happened. So it's to say that you can still do cardio, but how you do it needs to change. You need cardio that supports your hormones. So what would that look like, and not kind of hijack them, right? And then cardio does have seasons too. Like I just trained for a half marathon. I certainly did prioritize more long distance cardio than I did, let's say, weight training, but it's understanding that that's a season of my life over the trajectory of my life. So over the past year, it didn't take up the bulk of my training, nor did it take up the bulk of my training in the last 2 or even 3 years. So if your cardio kind of leaves you wipe out, or maybe for some people it leaves them a little bit more anxious, like whether that's like more jittery in your body, more unsettled, wired mind, tired body. For others, it can result in like craving more carbs, but for others, it's not necessarily carbs. It's just like you're like insatiable hungry. You're constantly hungry. It could be a sign like, hey, you need to change things up, right? It's not because you're weak or you're lazy or can't do those things. It's just like you're in a different season of your life. So what does a smart cardio approach kind of look like? And so it's, obviously walking. So getting in your steps. So that's really hard for someone who has a sedentary job, right? Or struggles with sleep. How do you get up in the morning to get your steps? Because the evenings are so, busy. For some clients that I'm working with one-on-one, it's like looking at a standing desk, looking at, scheduling like a couple of breaks. Like you have a 15-minute break. How can you get a little steps? You have a lunch break. How can you use some of that to get your steps? Whatever that looks like. For some people, that's just not possible. They work shift work. So we're looking at how to optimize their workouts or their walking on the days that they're off. For other people, like that's not possible. So we're looking at how we can use it on the weekends. So walking, obviously that's what we need to do for cardio. That was something that definitely I dismissed when I was in my 20s and my 30s, because if it's not sweating, it's not intense enough, it's not getting my heart rate up, then it's not working. So why bother spending my time on that? So that's different now that you're in perimenopause and menopause, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But also, if you're the kind of person who like after meals you crave something like sugary, for example, or you have more carbs, or it's like, hey, you've been told like you have higher insulin levels or higher blood sugar levels, or you have diabetes or anything like that, then walking post meal, because we also know that insulin kind of like changes or shifts when you're in perimenopause or menopause. Walking every time after your meal, that's a great way to manage blood sugar levels. I even had a client who's like, I can't get out and walk because I'm in the country, I'm in the middle of buttfuck nowhere, and I can't get out for a walk, but what she can do is dance, and she was do some squats and stuff like that after a meal. The idea is still the same. There's zone 2 cardio, so that's kind of that moderate pace cardio that I was talking about. You can identify it as moderate pace because you can still hold a conversation. Maybe you want to limit that. For some people who are like, I'm into that, it's my de-stressor, it's the way to get out of the house, like it's all of those things. It not just serves me for fat loss or weight loss or whatever, although we can debate on that. It serves as like kind of my mental outlet. Then maybe you want to look at it as, how do I balance that out with everything else? So how do I do it, 2 times, maybe 3 times a week? What would that look like as well? The challenge with runners though, and I've said this before, and other clients have said this too, is like, I'll say like, oh, how far are you running? And they'll be like, 5K or 10K, because they know they can run half marathons or they can run whatever. You dismiss that is still that's still cardio, that's still work. It's because you're looking at your capacity to do more, so you dismiss, hey, 5K is no big deal. But we're not looking at it from a hormonal standpoint, and we're not looking at it from the stress standpoint, particularly like I just mentioned. You can look at shorter intervals. So intervals being like 20 to 30 seconds, 1 times per week, for insulin sensitivity and energy. So you do want the higher intensity. We're not dismissing the higher intensity. We just want to be strategic about it. Whether that's your weight training one day, higher intervals the next day, and they're short and they're quick. Or, it could be like, hey, you're doing your weight training and then you're doing, a quick kind of like interval burner right at the end, for example. No more than 30 to 35 minutes per session if it's moderate to hard. Reason being, if it's longer, you're probably not pushing hard enough in the session, because how can you be pushing hard enough and going longer? The only way to do that is if you took longer rests. My experience coaching women over 16 years, they're not taking long enough rests because they're like, get in, get out, I gotta go home, I got shit to do. And so if that's not happening, then you're not pushing hard enough in your sessions. And oftentimes we think we need to put in a certain amount of time, 1 hour, 2 hours in the gym, for example, in order to get the results we want. But what we're missing is, well, if I was just more intentional and had more intensity in my sessions, then I get more bang for my buck, right? And then you want to cycle your cardio around your stress and your sleep versus being like rigid routines. Meaning, if I was having a really, really stressful week and my sleep was disrupted and like I had that wired but tired kind of feeling, for example, it's not like, oh, but I have to do 3 cardio sessions this week, for example. So bottom line, cardio isn't canceled. It just has to be more customized to you now. Although exercise is good for the body, we need it, and for some, it's like a good stress reliever for them. What most miss is it's still a form of stress, even if you don't feel like it is. So here's the problem. Your body doesn't know the difference between, let's say, a 90-minute spin class and running from a bear. Stress is stress. It doesn't know how to decipher that, right? It's going to do the exact same thing in a spin class as it will running from from a bear, for example. And during peri-menopause, you're already carrying a full load. So for some of you, it's like, hey, we're carrying financial pressure, or in expectations, whether that's childhood expectations or expectations on us to be the person for all people, and do all things for all people. You have work deadlines as well, and work expectations as well, and your family depends on you having a job in order to be financial stable. So that kind of snowballs into it. We tend to have more sleep disruption. So the women that I talked to in the last 2 weeks are having that 2 a.m., 3 a.m. constant wake up call, for no apparent reason. And then you have teenagers, aging parents, relationships, whether, relationships are ending, relationships are starting, relationships are not fulfilling anymore. And then you just have kind of like this life period, right? Whereas a lot of women are identifying as, I'm just surviving, waiting for this shift to happen. It might take another 5 or 10 years. So now layer that on top of intense high volume training, you're kind of like redlining your system, and you're not just redlining it once, you're redlining that constantly, right? And the result, what happens is then, okay, so you want weight loss or fat loss, right? And you keep prioritizing all of this intense high volume training because we're discounting the amount of stress that we have, because I'm capable, I got it, I'm independent, I can figure this out, everything's figure outable, right? So you keep dismissing it, but then you have a redlining system, right? So then what ends up happening is all of a sudden it's like, why am I so hungry? Why is this like interfering with this? Why can't I get this together, right? Then you get more cravings. Then what happens is you get worse sleep. Maybe you still you sleep the 6, 7, or 8 hours, but you don't feel as rested. When you wake up, you're so groggy, or maybe you are getting that 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. what kind of wake up call, right? Or maybe you're having trouble now falling asleep. You have unstable moods or energy dips, right? Where it's like unpredictable. I don't know if I'm walking on eggshells today, or if it's like the good time, or you're like snapping really quickly. Or it's like, rather than belly fat, going down, you see belly fat going up. Then you're more sluggish to recover, and you maybe even have more body aches and pains. And I have some clients who, at the beginning are going so hard because they think, that's what every other diet has taught them about. And then they get more injuries as well, which are harder to recover from, right? And you got inflammation that won't quit. Inflammation can be like, you can have it around your digestive system, like you're bloated, you're gassy, or whatever. Some people get inflamed eyes when they wake up in the morning. Some people can't get their fingers, you can't take your fingers off, but your rings off your fingers. Some people get like the glove line or the sock line or the pant line, for example. Those are all signs of inflammation as well. And a body that's just really tired, and not really toned the way you want it to. So when you layer intense cardio on top of that without managing the dose, you kind of tip the balance from productive stress to overflowing kind of the stress bucket. And the result, you get like more plateaus, you get more burnout, you get the opposite of what you want. Like I said, belly fat, poor sleep, and irritability. So this simplicity means, for some women, it's listening to this, I guess for simplicity's sake, some women that are listening to this need to really just think, maybe I need to rethink cardio. That was something that worked in my 20s and 30s, or something that helped me lose the first 20 or 30 pounds, but now it's not working. Do you need to consider the stress that you're dismissing or diminishing because you're like, I'm an independent woman, it's figure outable, I got this, I always figure it out, my track record is that I always get through it. You're diminishing all that, but you're not understanding the hormonal shifts that are happening in your body that make that window shorter, right? Or smaller. So bottom line, steady state endurance cardio, like long runs or like spin classes, for example, can feel therapeutic, and mentally it can be really grounding. But if your goal is like metabolic health, fat loss, and muscle retention, it's not the most efficient tool. And don't worry, I got you covered. We're talking about zones in a bit, because it's all the rage. And if you're wondering about what I'm what about walking? Like I got you covered. So what is a good cardio strategy now that you're in perimenopause or menopause? So it kind of already went into like how you could lay out your schedule. And so what I would do is take out a piece of paper, go Monday to Sunday, write out a 30-day plan, kind of following what I kind of said at the beginning of the training and seeing what that would lay out for you, right? And that would be like you could do a version of it like this is my maximum output plan. This is what an ideal or maximum output plan would look like. And then you could create a version of that that would be for 30 days where it's like, if this 30 days all went to hell, all hell broke loose and everything, is this would be the minimum amount that I could do that would kind of cover my basis there. And then you're kind of like, you don't want to necessarily give in to every mood and every feeling that you have, because we know that moods and feelings come and go, and we need to have discipline, to be committed, to be consistent. We need to ride the waves of emotions and thoughts that we have, but it does give you kind of a strategy for two different seasons of your life. So you want to plan that in perimenopause that does have a combination of strength, walking, short, small bursts of intensity, not endless cardio sessions that burn muscle, and tax your recovery. So we want to use it wisely. We want to think of endurance cardio as a tool for your mental well-being, not your body composition. And it's to say, if you're the kind of person who's like, I really just love running, I'm getting outside, it's easy, I don't have to think about it, I already make a shit ton of decisions, I love getting out of the house, that way if I run, the kids don't have to come with me, whatever. It's okay, align the expectations around mental well-being, don't align the expectations around body composition. Meaning then you don't get into a place where you're like, well, I'm running every day, why isn't this working? No, it's working because it's helping with your well-being, and that's showing up in specific ways. But when it comes to body composition, you need different tools and strategies. And most are thinking about more, right? More equals more and more results, better results. But it's really about what the minimum effective dose, the least amount of stimulus required to produce a desired amount, not the most. Because what happens when you plateau, if you're not good at managing your nutrition, changing the variables in your nutrition, then you start thinking, okay, it's not working, I'm plateauing. Maybe I got to do this. Maybe I got to do this. Maybe I got to do this. And then it's like, where do you tap out with that, right? So this also means adding in restorative practices like sleep, stretching, rest days, nature connection, for example, because when you're stressed and inflamed, it shows up as belly weight, it shows up as cravings, it shows up as poor recovery, and it shows up as kind of like not being able to bounce back. And poor sleep, as a side note, does lead to more cortisol, less insulin sensitivity, more hunger and emotional eating, and more visceral fat, which is like, well, it stores like bad chemical messengers or signals. So visceral fat isn't just about looks, it's about like, it's a hormonal disruptor and it's an inflammation driver. So what actually helps with that, so you have visceral fat, but then when you guys say, or whatever you say, hey, I just want to lose the muffin top, well, if it's just muffin top, that's not the visceral fat, that's not necessarily the bad fat that we don't want. When we have too much of the bad fat, then that's when, hey, signals can get disrupted. That's probably when you say things like, I just need my hormones balanced. And then that's when you maybe see inflammation drive up, like I'd already explained. So what actually helps with that is, again, like I said, walking after meals certainly helps with that. Obviously, like poor sleep, higher cortisol, like try and get as much light as you can, particularly now before the winter, when it's like, the darkness is coming sooner, and the darkness in the mornings is coming that much sooner. So you want to balance the strength training, fuel for recovery. You want to eat protein rich meals and kind of snacks, and then limiting alcohol, because alcohol can also get in the way of your sleep. Sure, it can make you pass out and get to sleep, but it actually limits your ability to get into deep sleep, and can also drive up more inflammation and then get in the way. Think about it like as a detour that you need to constantly be taking when your goal is to get to fat loss, right? So in previous trainings, we did talk a lot about all of this. So now a few things I want to cover before we kind of jump into nutrition is, some of you, when I get on calls, you'll say, I just want long, lean muscles. Okay, so let's break this one down. You can't lengthen your muscles through exercise. Your muscles are attached to your bones. Their length doesn't change. That long, lean look, it's either muscle built through progressive training, strength training, which we've covered in previous trainings, or a body with lower overall fat mass, that just because you have overall fat mass, your muscles are just more visible. But what it is not is some magical result as it doesn't come from like bar or Pilates or light weights or high reps. So if you hear yourself saying, I just want long, lean muscles, she's got long, lean muscles, I want that for me. That's built through progressive strength training. So we need to understand what that means and what that actually looks like in daily life. And then we need to look at, okay, that means that I need to reduce my overall fat mass so that my muscles are more visible there, right? So, but it's not something that is done through bar Pilates or light weights. Not to say that you can't do those things or there aren't seasons where you do those things, but if that's all you're doing or that is the bulk of what you're doing, and you're saying, there's a disconnect between those two things. So, what actually shapes a woman's body in perimenopause? Now, I won't go too deep, as there are other trainings that cover this. So, what shapes your body the best? One, progressive overload. So, if you're like, what the fuck is she talking about when she says progressive overload? Then you want to go look at those trainings to really understand what that looks like in practical terms. Not toning classes, no pink dumbbells, no chasing a lean look. Progressive overload kind of means lifting heavier over time, increasing your reps or your sets, slowing down the tempo, shortening rest time, making the movements harder. So you can change like the angles, the pauses, the control. So we often think it's about getting a new workout program. It's not. There's many variables in there to help you with progressive overload without constantly chasing, I need a new program. So this is how women build strength, preserve muscle, and reshape their bodies, especially as hormones shift. I've done a training too. Can you lose weight and build muscle at the same time? You'll want to look at that one too. So muscle is your metabolic currency in menopause. It improves that insulin sensitivity, your bone health for sure. And you're like, what the hell do I care about bone health? I just need to lose weight. Well, you will care about bone health when you like look at osteoporosis, and the risk of falls is greater for women as they age, right? And that bone loss increases more so for women as well. And you also need muscle for metabolism. If you're like, I have a slow metabolism or I have no metabolism, which isn't true, then you need muscle. And then also for that stress resilience as well. So muscle doesn't make you bulky, it gives your body shape. If you feel puffy, it's likely due to inflammation or stress or poor recovery or under fueling as well. So your muscle growth will be influenced by your genetics and your hormone profile, your training age in the history, right? Obviously, someone who's been at it for so long. Like, I don't know if you've ever looked at, like, not to say that we want, everybody here wants to be like bodybuilder or whatever. They just want to look like they train and look healthy and feel confident and happy in their body. But if you look at somebody who's done bodybuilding and you're like, wow, they look like their muscles are like dense. Like that's often my husband and I will say that, like, that's old muscle. That's someone who has a greater training history. They've been more consistent over time doing that thing. Your nutrition actually will influence your muscle growth, specifically your protein intake, your training frequency and intensity, and your recovery, sleep, and stress as well. But the one thing that's certain, you won't wake up bulky by accident. Well, what you will wake up with is stronger bones, better posture, more defined shape, improved metabolism, and a body that holds up through life's demands. Okay, so let's go back to understanding cardio zones just for a bit. I won't rant about weight training and progressive overload anymore. So just because this has been coming up and it's been kind of the buzzwords on social media is these zones. Everybody's talking about these zones and you should be in these specific zones. So let's break down the zones. Okay, so zone 1 to 2 is considered like low to moderate intensity. So think about like dog walking, post-dinner stroll, and light cycling, which, by the way, I'll tie this all back to the cardio conversation in which we started this training with. So maybe I digress by talking about weightlifting, but okay. So zone 1 to 2 is low to moderate intensity. So think like your dog walking, your post dinner stroll, or like light cycling, for example. So that actually helps you promote recovery. It doesn't increase your hunger or your cortisol. It's great for blood sugar regulation, digestion, lowering inflammation, and it doesn't burn you out. So we want to use it often. It's often underestimated and undervalued, but it has a massive impact. Do you have to hit 10,000 steps? Heck no, you don't have to hit 10,000 steps to have the benefits of zone 1 to 2. Zone 3 to 4, that's kind of like what I'm calling no man's land, or be strategic about it at least. It's the I feel like I worked out, but also feel wrecked kind of space. And let me specify that a little bit more. So it's too hard to be easy, too easy to drive real adaptation. It raises cortisol, especially if you live here, like you're spending way too much time here. It can lead to actual muscle breakdown, increased hunger and belly fat via elevated stress hormones, and you just don't recover well. So if you spend most of your cardio here, you look like you're working hard, but your body just doesn't look any different. In fact, it could be going the wrong way, and your other habits, like your cravings, your hunger, those sorts of things, even just like the way you recover, can all go in the opposite direction you want to. So that's kind of zone 3 to 4. We're saying, like, hey, we don't want that to make up the bulk of your movement or your workouts in perimenopause or menopause. Can you still do them? Yeah, you can still do them, particularly if they give you some mental relief as well, for sure. And if you're the kind of person who goes from doing nothing to then I'm taking up running, that's a way better space to be. It's just, if you're a thing, I'm putting in all the effort and I'm not getting the results I want, it's, are you spending too much time in zone 3 to 4? Zone 5 is high intensity bursts. So things sprint intervals, heavy strength sets, hit, done smart. So it builds strength and power. It supports your lean muscle, your metabolic control, and better sleep. And it just really sends like the right stress signals for adaptation. So, but you need like recovery and fuel to be paired with it. So you're using it strategically. It's not daily because of the because it's so intense. It takes the body a while to recover. Even if you feel like I can do it again, it still takes the body a little bit of time to recover. And so you want to use it strategically. So one, maybe twice per week, for example, in perimenopause or menopause. So I always like to say the dose is in the poison, right? Because it's like you can look at all these things, you shouldn't eat artificial sweeteners. Well, it depends. Are you doing it every day? To what capacity are you doing it? The dose always makes the poison. So long sessions, poor recovery, fasted cardio, the old school and broken. We want effective, we don't want exhaustive, right? And so again, that looks like walking post meals. It will help you manage your blood sugar, or maybe you like it in the AM or in the evening, right? Whatever's going to get you doing. If you're just like, I can't do it after meals, then do what you can, right? Zone 2 cardio is that moderate place. You can hold a conversation, maybe you want to do that twice a week if you're like, that's where I am. Short intervals are the 20 to 30 seconds. Maybe you're going to do that once to twice a week for insulin sensitivity and for energy as well. You're doing more because you're more intense and intentional in your workouts. You can keep them to 30 to 45 minutes, and you want to cycle your cardio around your stress and sleep so that you're not just like being rigid about kind of your routines there. For someone who's just starting out, that's like, you're probably listening to this and you're like, that's too much for me to do. That's why I said go back and create the, if all hell breaks loose for the next 30 days, create that plan and start there. And then it's raining. So, and then when things open up and the whole hell has settled itself, then you can go to kind of building your maximum plan. A lot of us do it kind of like we set our maximum plan and then life happens. And a lot of us don't have emotional regulation, or some women that I talk to don't have enough emotional regulation. So every time their emotions get in the way of their best laid plans, but yet they don't have a backup plan. They don't have their minimum dose plan. So pushing hard enough in your workouts without burning out is another, there's another training on that, and getting the best results from the time you do spend on the training, spend some time on that training too. Okay, so let's skip ahead to fueling your workouts. I've also done a training on this one, a full extensive training on this one too. So you can have the best training in the world, but if your nutrition doesn't support it, you're not building strength, you're actually breaking down. You think cutting calories and pushing harder will speed things up, but your body doesn't see it as a fat loss strategy, it sees it as a threat. So here's what usually happens when women in perimenopause train hard. You drastically cut back calories because you're like, I need to speed up for fat loss, or you overeat because you're starving after all that effort, or it's like, hey, I've earned it because I did work out, that kind of mindset. So either way, you're not fueling your body the way it needs, especially in the season of life where muscle recovery and hormone regulation are already harder to maintain. So in perimenopause, estrogen plays a role in building and preserving that lean muscle mass. So as it drops, your protein needs go up and your recovery capacity goes down. And training stress on top of that without enough food, especially protein, in your body will break down every muscle you're trying to build, not fat, muscle. And that's the opposite of what you want, right? So let's say you aren't eating enough, but you have the workout thing down pat. What can happen now that hormones are shifting is you see more muscle loss for reasons I just explained. You can see lower energy or poorer recovery. So for poor recovery, sure, it can mean more it can mean more like pains and sprains and things like that. Sluggish metabolism, where you feel like things are just not working the same, crappier sleep, more sugar cravings. You can see that, hey, I'm not actually getting stronger or having more endurance, or you're just like no improvements. You can see more hormonal dysregulations, where you're just like, things are good and then they're not good. Things are good and then they're not good. You can have more fatigue. My dad's trying to call me. More tired. You can have more brain fog, mood swings, body temperature regulations. Let's say you're always cold, for example, constipation or gut issues, hair loss, and then lower sex drive as well. And then for some on the extreme end as well, more period loss. So you feel like you're doing everything right, but you're stalled, not because you're not trying hard enough, but because your body's running on fumes. So if more than 2 to 3 of these are hitting regularly, you're likely under eating. And if it feels like you're even if it feels like you're eating enough, right? Especially some people will get caught up in that story of like, but it's really healthy. But you still need to support your outputs, the demands of your everyday life without exercise, and then what you are doing for exercise. So, and especially for women I'm speaking to who are skipping meals, they're avoiding carbs, or, living more on like protein bars and salads, right? So consistent under eating tanks your performance, and it increases kind of that food obsession. You'll overeat eventually and your body will just store it. So what to do instead is you want to eat protein. So a lot of my clients, we work on eating 30 to 40 grams per meal at a minimum. So that can also include how we're getting some protein in for some snacks to kind of meet our daily targets. We want to stop skipping meals. So a lot of them, when they first come in, they're like, I'm not hungry first thing in the morning, but they are hungry later at night. If I divided their day in half, they're taking in a lot more calories in the later end of the day versus the top end of the day. And so we're looking at how do we kind of balance those things out, because when we have them balanced, we have more stabilized blood sugar, and then that helps with recovery too. So we want to think meal timing equals hormonal regulation, including cortisol and improved sleep. And then we don't train fasted. You kind of already, like when you get up in the morning, your cortisol is already up. Everybody's is up in first thing in the morning. And then most of us think, not eating is how you're going to lose weight, or we're not hungry as well. And then we think coffee is breakfast. So then you're just adding stress on top of stress on top of stress. So we don't want to add more stress onto the system that's already stressed for reasons I just explained. And then we want to include carbs. We want to include carbs because they help kind of lower your cortisol and help you with that building the muscle and not store fat. Unless obviously you're overdoing it, but you're not overdoing it on carbs. You're just simply overdoing it on, unless you're eating carbs that bug you, that don't work for your system. So then that drives up inflammation as well. But you're going to be storing fat if you're just over consuming in calories. It's not about carbs. So about gut health in perimenopause or menopause, what we need to consider is that estrogen doesn't just affect your period, it affects your gut. And when gut diversity drops, that's why inflammation rises. So what happens in perimenopause or menopause is your gut barrier weakens. You have more bad bacteria, less good. You have a risk of IBS, bloating, more acid reflux, for example. Estrogen loss equals low stomach acid and equals poor digestion. Sleep suffers, so you have insulin resistance, that goes up, and then gut issues increases visceral fat and more inflammatory signals. So hence why you want to eat more high quality food, not less, but in a variety, and you want like more fiber, more protein in that sort of sense, right? So if your body's not changing, your food intake might be the missing piece as well, not your effort. The challenge is that, or you're moving into a place where you want to learn how to eat more intuitively, right? But post-workout fuel isn't necessarily about intuition. It's about fueling. One, you just tore up your muscles in the gym, so we want to recover those muscles and we want to start rebuilding those muscles. So the post-workout meal is not necessarily about hunger. It's about what it actually does. It's like when you When you go to the gym, it's like half of your workout's done, the other half is how you fuel your body, including your post-workout. Some women get into the mindset of like, but I just burn those calories, why would I eat them now? It's a greater deficit. That's a faulty way of thinking. Some people work out late at night and they're like, but the next thing I'm just going to go to bed, so I don't want to eat. That's faulty thinking too. So we do want to fuel our workouts. So you can eat within 60 to 90 minutes in both directions. It's how you balance out your meals throughout the day matters more. And then also, like, you know, digestion. Some people can't eat before a workout. So you think about, like, for those women who get up early in the morning and then have that workout and you're like, I literally roll out of bed, put out my clothes, put on my shoes and head to the basement or whatever. You can still think about 15 grams of protein in your pre-workout, even if you're not hungry. Appeases the hypothalamus, manages cravings later. And you can even like put protein in your coffee, a bit of yogurt or Fairlife shake. That makes it super easy and easy to digest when there isn't enough time between your workout, your getting up and your workout. So the goal isn't to eat less, it's to eat enough with intention, consistency, and confidence. The foods you eat should help you feel good, not trigger guilt or hypervigilance. And movement, it should build you up, not break you down. So I want to leave you with some questions to help you assess if you're on the right track. It'll also serve you as a template, putting this into action. So this is when, if you haven't already, get your pen and paper out. And it's also, if you're here live, a great opportunity to ask me questions, because we covered a bunch of like little random things. Like we covered cardio, we covered like weightlifting, and now we just covered some nutrition basics too. And it was kind of a nice way to wrap up some of the other previous trainings that we've done. So training and exercise, when you think, so I got you 4 questions that you can think about. So am I training with intention or just doing more to feel like I'm doing enough? So meaning, am I training with intention and purpose, or is it just like I did my 45 minutes today? It's kind of the same equivalent to somebody saying, I did my meditation practice or my breathing exercise this morning, but when shit hit the fan at 4 o'clock today, I didn't tap into my meditation. I didn't tap into my journaling. I didn't tap into my deep breathing at all. So it's like you want to have intention and purpose when you're doing it. And some of us are looking at, I'm just putting in the time. I did 45 minutes. I do it consistently, or an hour, but we're not questioning, am I doing it with intensity, purpose? Am I doing enough? Do I know which cardio zone I'm training in? And is it supporting recovery or raising my stress? Even though you don't feel the stress, I just explained what's happening. Now that you know this, you can begin closing the knowing and doing app by saying, well, okay, how am I setting up my cardio in my training plan? And am I lifting in a way that challenges my strength, not just burns me out, right? So just because like I'm making myself tired, I'm sweating, I'm heavy breathing, by the time I'm done, I'm just tired. No, are you training in a way that challenges your strength? And do I recover well, or am I always sore, tight, or exhausted? When it comes to nutrition and fueling, am I fueling before my workout? And what about after? Those are 2 important things, particularly for someone who does not eat consistently throughout the day. Is like, sometimes I skip lunch, sometimes I skip a snack, sometimes I don't eat breakfast, I'm just kind of random or whatever. You wouldn't want a random boyfriend. You don't want a random eating plan. So am I fueling before my workouts and after my workouts? Am I eating to support my hormones, muscle, and recovery, or just eating to stay kind of in a low calorie? So, you know, I just had a conversation with a client. It was like, you know, I eat the rice cakes, I do the protein bars and that sort of thing because it's low calories. But you have to think about, does this support my hormones? Are you creating an environment where your hormones want to be happy? And some of us are saying, I'll just go to the doctors and get my blood work done and go on HRT. You can do all of those things, but you still need an environment where your hormones want to be happy. And are you eating for muscle? That means eating enough. That means training with progressive overload. That means looking at how you're spacing out your workouts, and are you recovering? Did I get 30 to 40 grams of protein at meals consistently? So you eat 3 times a day. Think about how that adds up, you know, and you can say, yeah, well, I'm getting protein. No. Do you have the evidence? So it's like somebody saying, I'm saving money, but never looks to see how much is in their savings account, or that they're doing it regularly. It's not the same thing. And am I eating enough to match my activity, or am I under eating and hoping for more fat loss? Because that's what I feel like it takes to get there. And then hormones and stress in my training. Is my training adding to my stress or helping regulate one? This one's really tricky for over-functioning, high-achieving women, because they don't know how to identify stress, particularly mental or emotional stress. Do I recognize how poor sleep is affecting my recovery, my cravings, and my belly fat? For some women, they're just so focused on the cravings, they're not focusing on the connection of poor sleep or cravings. Am I cycling between extremes where I'm overdoing it, I'm burning out, and then I like do a gap where there's nothing and then I start all over? And do I feel calm, energized, and focused, or do I feel wired, foggy, and reactive? When it comes to gut health and inflammation, am I eating foods that support digestion and gut health? You'll know because you won't have acid reflux, you won't have the burping or the burning feeling, you won't have food come up in your mouth as well. You won't have, bloating or gas or extreme amount of gas. Sometimes the gas happens because you increased your fiber and your protein. Or you won't have like loose stools, inconsistent stools, a floating stool, food in your stools, or messy wipes, for example. Is bloating, reflux or irregular digestion something I ignore or address? I gotta tell you, yes, yesterday on a call, it was someone's like, yeah, but I've never had good digestion. I've never had good digestion. Therefore, it's never going to be solved. No, that's just not how it works. And do I include fiber, a variety, and whole foods in my day, or eat the same things on repeat? I do eat the same things on repeat for the most part. So for breakfast and generally for lunch throughout the week, but I get my variety in at dinner or at snacks or on the weekends. So that's just the way it makes it easier for me. But for some of you, it's like you eat the same things every single day because it's not because of simplicity or because you enjoy it. It's because you feel like that's what it takes or whatever. And then you wonder why you have cravings when you're around all those other foods, right? You're not creating a competitive arena for both foods. So mindset, is my current approach sustainable or something I'll keep restarting every few weeks? So final check-in, is what I'm doing building me up or slowly wearing me down? And am I training for the life I want or punishing the body I have? I really like this last question. Am I training for the life I want or punishing the body I have? I think that's worth considering. Okay, we covered a lot of different areas in this training. Again, if you're here live, it's an opportunity for you to ask questions as well. But I hope what it did is it took like some of these more complex kind of things, broke it down into like making it simplify, asking you, okay, now how can I apply this? And then giving you the questions to kind of evaluate your strategy. I hope that's what I did. That was the goal of today's training. So these trainings are really just, to help you make connections, simplify again those bigger topics, take imperfect action, because doing simple better is the secret to real progress. So this is your permission slip to really embrace being an imperfect action taker. Take what you've learned, take some things out of this, not all of those things because there's too many, and then apply them and turn them into action, right? You don't want to keep the gap, widening the gap between knowing and doing. So these trainings, the goal would be that they would provide you valuable steps. It's one way I support women inside this community, but I do one-on-one coaching. It's customized coaching. It's all remote, and it's where we're looking at nutrition, exercise, stress, and sleep habits. So in a way that supports your hormones, your energy, digestion, and obviously sustainable weight loss. But also it's like the mindset that you need in order to have that sustainable piece that a lot of diets are missing, in something that has a lot of like structure, it has the tools, it has the high accountability. So if that's something you want to explore, pop into my DMs and let's just have a conversation about your goals. If you're like, that feels too scary to reach out to someone because it means like I'm moving towards doing something and I'm not sure about that, then just head to the guide tab and you'll be able to hear the transformation stories of other women that have gone through the coaching process. So as always, when I do these when I do these trainings, I always like hearing what is the imperfect action you're going to take as a result of listening to this training, because nothing changes if it just stays at listening and learning. You need to move it into action. So let me know in the comments what your action step is. Okay, I'm Coach Cindy, signing out.